case of Bial. But just to highlight a little bit more, Bial is an innovative pharmaceutical company. It is dedicated to discover, develop, and commercialize medicines. By the 90s, they created their R&D projects. In the last decade, they gave birth to their own medicines. The Bial Group invests, as I told you before, over 20% of its turnover in R&D. Their R&D center is located in Portugal and is staffed by international teams of highly qualified people. It comprises chemists, pharmacologists, biochemists, physicians, and pharmacists, and different other professionals, all of whom are dedicated to finding new drugs in two major areas of research, neurosciences and cardiology. The scientific team centralizes all the areas involved in the process of finding new medicinal products, like chemical, pharmacological, and clinical research. They cooperate with scientists from universities, industry, and research centers to deliver the best solutions to health professionals, patients, and their families. The group, as I told you earlier, is a member of the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations, which is the respective federation of leading research firms in the European pharmaceutical sector. More recently, Bial also established a new affiliate in the US, Bial Biotech Investments. Bial Biotech is a research center of excellence for the development of genetically defined Parkinson's disease therapeutics. With this acquisition, Bial is expanding its pipeline, namely with the integration of new compounds in neurodegeneration already in clinical development, specifically for Parkinson's disease, where the company already has a significant market position. António Portela, which is here with us today, started working as a pharmaceutical multinational in the UK and then came to Bial. At the age of 35, assumed the position of CEO of the company, which was founded by his great-grandfather for more than 90 years ago. So I would like to, again, to thank António Portela for being with us tonight, for sharing some of your moments with our group. And António, the floor is yours. You can make your presentations, and afterwards, I think that we will interact with you, because people are eager to meet you, to understand what is Bial. People from outside Portugal. In Portugal, we all know Bial. I don't know if the other colleagues know so well Bial. And then I would like them to interact with you, to comment, to observe, to ask you some questions. So António, thanks again, and please, if you want, you can now have the floor.
Thank you, Dina, for the very, very nice introduction. And hello to everybody. Hello to Jean-Luc as well. It's a pleasure to be here and talk to you a little bit today about the journey that we've been embarking, namely over the last 25, 30 years, which has been a journey of research and development, trying to bring new and innovative medicines to patients. So I'll try to share. I've got a few slides. I prepared a few slides that can help me with the presentation about our activities and what we've been doing. I'll leave time afterwards for discussion, which I always think is the best part in having that discussion. So please make sure you have questions, and put all the questions that you have, because I think that's the most interesting part. So I'll try to be concise in the presentation, so that then we can use the time to discuss. I'll try to share my slides. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. So I called this presentation from bench to patients, which is our innovation journey. And you know, to 1 second. So we are an innovative pharmaceutical company. We're based in the outskirts of Porto, where we have centered most of our activities. So, you know, the buildings that you see there is where we have our office building, which is the one on the left. All the middle, the buildings in the middle are related to our manufacturing. We have 2 manufacturing sites there, and the big one is the warehouse where we store our medicines before they are expedited to, you know, patients all over the world. The 2 buildings on the right, they are the Research and Development Center, where we have been doing most of our research. Until very recently, this was the only site that we had, and we concentrated all our activities here, which is, I would say, an advantage, that we have everybody sitting in the same site, which is something that today some of the big multinational companies sometimes complain that they have so many sites, which is difficult for people to talk and to discuss amongst what they're doing. As Dina was saying, you know, very recently we've acquired a company in the US, a small R&D lab in the US, but I'll talk a little bit about that later on. Give you a bit of background on, you know, who we are. You know, the company was established in 1924 by my great-grandfather, and you know, we've evolved significantly since then. We're a privately owned company, you know, still 100% owned by the family, and we have 2 research and development centers, you know, one in Porto and this new one in Cambridge, based on genetically modified compounds for Parkinson's disease. Over the years, we've been establishing affiliates, our own affiliates. In Europe, we have, you know, Spain, Germany, the UK, Italy, and Switzerland. Spain is today our biggest affiliate. Has been for the last 3 or 4 years, has been the biggest affiliate in the company, even bigger than Portugal. And we've been in Spain for the last 21 years. So we have a significant size team in Spain. And now we have also presence and affiliates in the US, but also covers French, Africa, and Panama, and Philippines, our Latin or Central American operations. Our products are sold in 63 countries worldwide, and we have just a little bit over 1,000 employees. Our annual revenue last year was a little bit over 300 million, and we invest around 20% of our turnover in research and development activities, and this has been consistent over the last few years. Some years we invest a bit more, some years we invest a bit less. It depends on the projects that we have and how, you know, the development phase of those projects is. I'll go back now 30 years to what the board, my father as the head of Bial, and the board at this time, and this was in the 80s, they decided that we as a company had to, you know, face and live through these 3 strategic axes, you know, quality, innovation, and internationalization. And they have remained, you know, very, very live, and still today, you know, these are the axes that we are focusing our activities on. So quality, and I'll start thinking, you know, telling you a little bit why we've decided for these 3. You know, quality, because if you think back to the 80s, you know, Portugal is a country that has not, you know, doesn't have any tradition in pharma or in innovation, research and development. And if that's still true today, that was very true in the late 80s. So if we wanted to be a company that was, you know, competitive, you know, we needed to do and play with the same quality as all the other pharma companies were, and namely the global companies. So our aim was not to do things just, you know, to be capable in Portugal, but to be capable as much as we could with big pharma. So we started improving our levels of quality. And when I say levels of quality, this is obviously related to the products that we produce, but not only to the products, also to the quality of the people that we have, to the quality of the processes that we have and establish internally. So this was fundamental for the company to decide to move a few steps up the ladder in terms of moving into innovation. At the time, innovation was inexistent in Portugal in terms of pharmaceutical business, and we started our research and development operations at the beginning of the 90s, 93, with just a team of 3 people. The reason for that was, we had lived for most of, or for all of Bial's life until then, based on, at the time it was called copies, but it is what today's are generic medicines. So we basically copied what was around. Portugal didn't enforce any IP at the time, but it was understood by our management that that would have to change. And we did not want to compete in a generic market, but we wanted to compete in an innovative market. So, we started this process focused on central nervous system and cardiovascular, which are still the 2 areas that we are focusing on today. And it started establishing a small team, first in chemistry, pharmacology, biology, and trying to create new molecules and processes that would deliver drugs to come to the market. We knew that this was going to be a very difficult job, but also what we knew is that the investment required to do this was going to be a huge investment. And we could not only do this innovation just for Portugal, we had to do it for the global market. That meant that at some point we also wanted to go international, and that meant that we needed to start our internationalization process at the time. We had some medicines, and at that time, part of the way that we started learning from what Big Pharma was doing is, we started establishing relationships with Big Pharma in licensing of their drugs, of their innovative drugs that we could start selling in Portugal. So by doing this, we were promoting and commercializing innovative drugs in Portugal, but we were learning from Big Pharma in terms of production, in terms of quality, in terms of how they did things, how they developed the drugs. So this was a huge learning experience to us. And we also started by doing this, we also started, entering some smaller international markets for us. And we started this process in emerging markets because the investment was smaller, the risk was also smaller, and we didn't have that much resources at the time. Also, our products were older products, mature products. So we started, having some experience in Africa, in Latin America, in terms of trying to understand how can we run, international markets. And this access, this strategic access, remain today still very, very part of our culture and the way we work. If I talk about quality and starting by there, I need to start by people. People are what is the most fundamental asset of Bial today. We were only able to do and achieve what we have achieved because of the quality of the people that we've been able to bring in. If you look, and this is, I think a rare example in Portugal, we have over 1,000 employees, about 55% in Portugal, 16 in Spain, and then, in all the other affiliates, we have a smaller number of people there. But if you look at all these people that we have worldwide, these 1,000 people that we have worldwide, more than 80% of them have a university degree, and 10% are PhDs. So we have a significant number of people in the organization that are highly trained, and this has always been a success factor for Bial. That's the only way that we could develop and research and development, but also that we could embark in an internationalization process with qualified people. In terms of research and development, as I said, these are the 2 areas that we focus on, CNS and cardiovascular. We have about 160 people in research and development of 17 different nationalities. Portugal is obviously not known by its pharmaceutical development. So a lot of the people that we have today in our research center are people that come from other countries. So we had to go and pick people to cover what we were doing. And the basis of what we established, 160 people, it's a small team. In Portugal, it's considered a big team in terms of research and development. There's not many companies that have 160 people in research and development. But if you look at big pharma, this is a small team. Now, being a small team, what it allows us is, to control the whole process of development of drugs. From chemistry, biology, to formulation, the pharmaceutical development, and then, regulatory, market access, and then, potentially commercial in the future. So we have tried to establish competences internally that can go through the whole process of development of a pharmaceutical drug. It doesn't mean that we run the whole process. It means that we have internal competences that our internal team can manage the whole process. Now, we do a lot of outsourcing. We do a lot of collaborations, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But the core people, we have them internally, and they are able to run this process. And that has been, a significant part of the process. We have established, collaborations with, 158 institutions from 25 different countries. I've said what we've invested in research and development. But I think what's key here also to understand is that, to develop a new chemical entity, to develop a new drug, you need to really try a lot. We've synthesized about 15,000 new molecules in these last 25 years, and today we have 7 of them patented worldwide. So basically, most of what we do, and sometimes we joke with this internally, most of what we do goes to the bin. It's useless, for many different reasons. And that's a very difficult job in trying to find molecules that actually show efficacy, but also show a safety profile that is very, very good. The timelines in terms of research and development are known. I just have here a graph that I took from FPIA, and that shows the timelines from the drug in terms of development, and also then in terms of commercialization. You normally take 10 to 12, 13 years to get a drug to the market. This is a lot of time and a lot of investment in all these different phases until you get to the market. And obviously you have to patent your drug at the beginning. IP is a fundamental part of this process, because if you don't have strong IP, you will not be able to commercialize this, because others will be able to copy your molecules. So IP is fundamental, but also to move through this process as quickly as possible. And obviously, as quickly as possible for us, it still takes a lot of time and a lot of investment. A drug IP has 20 years, potentially 25 if we get an SPC, Supplementary Protection Certificate. So if you see, we don't have much time to recover the investment that was done in a molecule. Now, today the calculation is that of every 10 drugs, less than half pay themselves in terms of when they get commercial. And we also have to think that most of the molecules don't even get to the market. So this is a really difficult process, very risky, where we need to have strong financial capabilities to be able to progress. We should progress with as much molecules as we have, because we know that most of them will die at certain point. In terms of collaborations, we over these last 25 years, we've established a lot of different collaborations in Portugal. I've named a number of them that we have been working with here. If we think back, 25, 20, 15 years ago, there was not much knowledge about, the process of developing a drug in Portugal. Today, we have some of these institutions that have a lot of capabilities that allow us to actually work with them on a regular basis. And they don't do everything, but they do part of the project. So these are very valuable collaborations to us, and we would not be able to do our research and development without this collaboration. So, for a company to bring a drug to the market, you have to establish, collaborations, and you have to find reliable partners that are, very good in science, very good in what they do, because it requires a lot of competences, to go through the very long process of developing a drug. As I said, we're investing. We've invested. These are numbers from 2018. The numbers from the Ministry of Science and Health and the universities, and they show that Bial is the biggest investor in Portugal in research and development from an industrial company. You have other companies. Altice is a service provider. But you don't have that many industrial companies that invest this much in Portugal. And without this financial capability, it's very difficult to invest in research and development in the pharma sector. So, for companies to actually develop, they need to make sure that from very early stages that, the finances are there in terms of, future development. Patents are also a big part. They play a big part in our sector. You see here a table with the companies that patent more in Portugal in terms of related to the health sector. So if you see, I think this is very interesting to note that within the first 26 companies that most patent in Portugal, 10 are within the health sector. So this means that this area, the health area, has been very vibrant, and there's a lot happening in here. Companies are protecting today a lot more than they used in the past. We are one of the companies that most patents in Portugal. We had 212 patents over the last 5 years, and we hold worldwide today more than 1,000 patents to our molecules. This means that what we've been able to achieve, and I'll talk a little bit about the drugs that we've developed. But basically, what this graph or this table shows is that there's not many companies that have been able to develop new drugs in Europe and in the world. So if you look at the table, the first part of the table is companies in Europe that have developed new chemical entities, and over the last 10 years, there's been only 31 companies that have been able to develop new chemical entities. So this is a very, very restricted number of companies that actually have been able, to develop innovative drugs. This doesn't compare very well, and I just wanted this to put you in perspective that Europe has not been a competitive place for innovation. These 31 companies, they've developed 70 new drugs over the last 10 years. But if you look at, the US has developed 187, Japan 52, and Switzerland 22. So, Europe today doesn't compare, or the European Union doesn't compare today very well with what's happening in research. And I think the European authorities need to think this very, very careful, how they create an environment that is more friendly to innovation in the pharma sector. Our pipeline today consists of a number of different molecules. If you look at what we have here, the first 3 lines, they all relate to Xebinix, which is an epilepsy drug that we've developed, and we've developed them for 3 indications. They're all, they are all 3 indications market today. We have a drug on Ongentys or Picapone for Parkinson's disease that's also marketed around the world. And then we have a number of compounds in still some in clinical research and some others still in preclinical research. We have one compound, PIA5, for pulmonary arterial hypertension. And we have one other compound in phase 1 for Parkinson's disease, which came from the acquisition we made in the US. So, and all the other projects are still very early stage. This requires a lot of investment, and it's difficult for us to have more projects. I wish we had more projects in the pipeline, but it does require significant financial resources to do that. So we are advancing, but we are advancing at not as a very high pace. I want to talk a minute about what our recent acquisition in the US. So and I'll go back one slide. So if we look back at the pipeline that we have, having a strong pipeline in the areas that we work on is very, very important. We have a number of compounds in CNS, in preclinical, being developed, and we have been much more successful, as you can see, in CNS than we have in cardiovascular. So what we did with Bial Biotech is, we were in discussions with one company in the US. It's a biotech startup in Cambridge, in Massachusetts, and to actually acquire a license for European rights. And the discussions ended up going very well. And we ended up acquiring. We didn't acquire the company, but we've acquired all the assets of the company, and we've also incorporated the labs and the people that were working in the labs with us. This gives us, a complete different perspective in terms of research and development of new products for the future. And I've put down a few bullet points here because why is this so important for us? Bial Biotech today is located in Cambridge. Cambridge is one of the most hot spots in biotechnology in the world today. So being close to a very vivid research community in the US, where most of the new projects are being developed, is very, very important. And we wanted to be close to that, and Bial Biotech, gives us the opportunity to be close to, a lot of these startups, to the research centers, to the universities, the MIT. So we have a number of benefits of being in that community. We have a small lab there, and we have a number of people in the lab. Our chief scientific officer in Bial Biotech, he's a professor of neurology at Harvard Medical School. This is something that, otherwise we would not be able to have such, a person of this caliber joining Bial, because he brings a wealth of experience, a very vast network, and the projects that he has developed over a number of years. So he and his teams are critical for us also, to develop new ideas to get in terms of Parkinson's disease. And what's been happening over the last 2 or 3 months since we've acquired them is there's been a lot of discussion between the two teams, the team that we have here in Porto and the team now in Cambridge, because there's a wealth of knowledge around Parkinson's disease in both teams. And that's been very, very interesting as well. And the last one is, to have our own presence in the US. The US is today the biggest pharmaceutical market. It's by far the biggest pharmaceutical market, but also is where most research and most innovative drugs are coming from. So being present in the US is fundamental to us. We don't have a commercial presence in the US, a direct commercial presence. We have 2 partners in the US that sell our drugs, but the US is already our 3rd market for Bial, and potentially over the next 2-3 years will be our number 1 market. And so we do have hopes that, one of these days we can have a commercial presence in the US, hopefully, if we are able to develop these new compounds successfully. So what have we developed over these last 25 years? The first drug that we did, and this was the first innovative drug ever developed in Portugal, was Zevinix. This is a drug for treatment of epilepsy. And it has been approved in Europe, in the US, South Korea, Turkey, and Australia. It's been a huge learning process for us. We've made mistakes in developing this drug that hopefully we have learned from, but we've been able to bring an innovative drug to the market that is helping hundreds of people, thousands of people today around the world. This is today our most important asset in the company. It represents about a third of our turnover today. And it has allowed us, to be present in the world globally. By having Xevinix approved by the FDA in the US, by EMA in Europe, this gave us a voice and made us visible in the world of pharma, namely in the CNS world. So, we gained a lot of credibility as a company by doing this. We established partnerships in most countries because at the time when Xevinix was developed and approved, we didn't have a commercial or we didn't have financial resources to establish our commercial operations around the world. So we basically partnered and other companies were doing all this commercial job for us. This has been different with our second drug, which is Ongentys. It's a COMT inhibitor for Parkinson's disease, for the treatment of Parkinson's disease, which has been approved in 41 countries today. 2020 has actually been a very significant year for us because we had approvals in the US, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Australia, and we've been able to launch the drug in the first 3 months. In all these markets, we don't have a Bial presence, so we are present through partners. So we've licensed the commercialization rights of the drug to these partners in the different countries. We also have it approved in Australia, and in China we have a partner, Wanbang Pharmaceutical, who's hoping to file in 2021, hopefully to get an approval by 2022. What was also different this time around is that we established our own operations in Europe. So we've been opening our affiliates apart from Spain, which we had for many years. We've opened the UK, we've opened Italy, we've opened Germany, Switzerland, and we are about to open France in January next year. So this means that we will cover most of the Western European countries. There will be more countries to come, and we will partner for Eastern European part because those countries are smaller. They have certain, they work in different way. The languages are always different, so we do prefer to partner than establishing our own affiliates in those countries. So Ongentys has been, it's our second, obviously, biggest drug. It will very shortly be our number one drug, and I think we're learning a lot in the process of what we've done with Ongentys from what we've done with Xevinix before. And a final slide, just to show to you that, I showed to you earlier on that, we had a lot of partnerships in terms of research and development, with universities, with CROs, with CMOs, in terms of developing our compounds. But we also have a lot of commercial partnerships. And you can see, most of, big pharma names you've heard from before, because we establish partnerships with these companies as well. Some of them in terms of in-licensing, and others in terms of out-licensing our drugs. So all these partnerships, being it in research and development or in commercial, when we get to commercial, are absolutely fundamental because we cannot do everything. And certainly a company with a small size like Bial has, we certainly cannot do everything ourselves in the research phase, but also we can't do everything in the commercial phase. So it's absolutely fundamental that we are able to establish partnerships, to manage these partnerships and to find the right companies or the right research centers to work with us. Not everything fits. Again, looking at this, not all companies have, these are active partners that we have today. Obviously, we are more successful with some than others. And again, this is a learning process for us in terms of how to find the right partner to work with us. And this was my presentation, trying to keep it in 30 minutes. I'll stop sharing now, and I remain open to questions or comments that you'd like to make.
Okay, thank you, António. It was a great presentation and a great journey from the beginning of the company till the moments that you are experiencing now with the expansion and so on. I have some questions, but I would like to give the floor to the student and also to João, who is here also with us. Something, or if they want to be part of the last slide as possible partners, I don't know. But the floor is open to students and to colleagues here. Do you want to comment something with António Portela?
I actually have a question, if I may, Tina.
Can you identify yourself?
I'm Philippe Quinas.
Yeah.
So my question would be, how is the return of investment of the partnerships you create with universities compared to return of investment of your own structure in Bial?
Sorry. Thank you for the question, Philippe. It's what's the return on investment? Put it this way: we can't have all the competences internally. I mean, some of the parts of the process of the development that we do are very specialized. We would need to spend significant amounts of money in equipment, in people, to actually do all the parts of the development of the process. So we do rely on partnerships in a lot of cases with universities that specialize and have the equipment to do those things. So for us, it's on the one hand, it's cheaper to do this in collaboration, but on the other hand, we can do it better with some of these partners because they have the competences to do this, and we don't have to hire people, we don't have to look for this. So it's very important that we try to find the right partners for the different processes. But certainly the return on investment, for certain parts, it's much better to do it externally than to do it internally.
Thank you.
And I made a question. So, hi, my name is Ana Clara. Well, thank you so much for your time and presentation. My first question is, when you are talking about your pipeline, you have several molecules and or several approach, or as you want to call them. When you have thought about the small company that you have acquired now in the US, what was the major factor for you to introduce their solution in your pipeline? In which phase of research and development they were that was the most attractive for you? Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah. Thank you, Ana Clara. Yes, I understood the question. So why did we do this acquisition? So basically, when we look at what compounds we are developing, as I said to you, we're focused on central nervous system and cardiovascular. So, but this is, even if we think this way, this is too broad. So where have we been more successful? And we have been more successful is in neurology, neuroscience. So even within CNS, for example, we haven't been, very much focused in psychiatry. We've been much more focused within neurology. Now, this means that on the one hand, we have, by developing 2 drugs within neurology, we have developed very strong internal competences in this area. This is one thing. The second thing is, by launching these products, we have today a commercial infrastructure that focuses on neurologists. So they cover neurologists. They don't cover other areas. So when we look at projects that we are developing or external projects, we have to think that if we develop these drugs one day and we want to make them commercial, can we use the same sales force as we have? So basically, can we use the same fixed costs that we have today? Or will we establish a different, and I'll give you an example. One of the molecules that we are developing is for pulmonary arterial hypertension. This is a different target, commercially is a different target. So if we one day decide, if the drug makes it to the market, and if one day we decide that we're going to commercialize this, this means that we have to establish a new sales force, which is a huge cost in addition to what we're doing. So we have to be very careful in terms of what we develop, or, you know, we have to make strategic decisions in terms of we are developing certain molecules. Do we want them to commercialize them ourselves, or will we license or sell them so that with that return, we'll be able to invest in our more strategic projects? Okay. That's one very important question that we need to ask in this process. Now, the other one is, you know, we in Bial, we have to face reality. You might, and I get that a lot when namely here in Portugal, you have a lot of money to invest. We don't have. We're very short of money. When you see 50 or 60 million in terms of investment, and I'll, you know, I think this is a good hint in terms of what we're doing. Until 2 or 3 years ago, we were not looking at anything externally. And the reason for that is the money we had was not enough for us to develop our own projects. Now, with the expansion of both our drugs, we've been able to save some money, and we have some money to look at external projects. But we have to be very careful in terms of what we look. Why did we choose this project in the US? I mean, I've told you some of the synergies that exist and why we want to place there. But looking particularly at the molecule that is more advanced, that's a molecule that is, you know, it's for genetically defined Parkinson's disease. So, you know, Parkinson patients have, you know, have mutations, and you know, namely in this case GBA1. So what we're targeting here, and this was what we found very, very interesting, is all Parkinson's drugs today are for symptomatic treatment. You know, they're not for disease modifying. What we found interesting here was the potential for a disease modifying treatment. If this works, it can be very, very valuable. Now, the risk is much higher because no one has ever developed a disease modifying treatment for Parkinson's disease. So we know that we're stepping up in terms of the risk, but you know, this is a drug that is, you know, in phase 1. They've done a phase 1 in patients already, so we have some data already in patients, and hopefully we're about to enter phase 2. So, you know, there's still risk in the project, but it's not like, you know, having something preclinical that we are currently, you know, we're not really looking at projects in preclinical.
Okay.
We are. If you look, if you think back at our pipeline, we have a gap in terms of what we had in the clinic. So we've launched Zevinix, we've launched Ongentys. We've only had one drug in the clinic, which is this drug for pulmonary arterial hypertension. We didn't have any other drugs for CNS, and namely for neurology, in the clinic. Not having a drug in the clinic means that, you know, it will take you 5-6 years until we get any of our CNS projects to the market. That's a lot of time for us to bring a new drug to the market. So our aim was trying to get something in the clinic that we could potentially get to the market within 3 years.
Okay.
So that you know, in a nutshell, I think that's why we looked at those projects at Bial Biotech.
So we may say that if a research package includes a phase 1 or part of a phase 1 clinical trial, it will be more attractive for a company like Bial to acquire the rights of that package.
Look, I think it's not for Bial. I think it will be for every company. And I'll give you the example, looking at our own projects, namely at Zevinix, which was the first one. We tried to partner Zevinix very early on. And I'll give you, you know, I'll tell you more or less where we ended up. But we tried to partner it very early on, you know, and this is before entering the clinic, and no one would offer us any, you know, reasonable money. You know, it's just peanuts, cents in this world. So then we did phase 1, then we did phase 2, and with phase 2 we thought, you know, we can get a good deal from a partner. We still couldn't. After we've done phase 3 successfully, our partner in the US, and this is just for the US, they paid $75 million just for signing. Okay. There were other milestones then with approval, and then, you know, royalties in terms of sales. So, you know, the more you move in the development pathway, the more valuable the project is also for external partners. Now, this is different, and if you get something, for example, Zebenix is not a new mode of action. You know, it's what we call today, it's a Me Too. It's a new chemical entity, but in a class that already exists today. So it's not so attractive in terms of partnering for the future. If you have something that is, you know, very innovative, disruptive, a new class, you know, a disease modifying in where it doesn't exist, or, you know, if you're targeting, for example, if you're targeting a disease that has no treatment at all, even in very early stages, this can be very attractive to license out, because companies will pay a lot of money for this if the science is right.
Okay, that's very good to know.
But it depends on where the project is. Now, obviously, I understand that the big problem here is how, if we don't partner early on, how do you finance it going forward?
Yes, because it's extremely expensive. You know better than me, but I mean, just the first part of preclinical, the end part of the preclinical is already extremely expensive. Then when we think about the clinical trials, it's huge. And having a partner for that has the expertise will be extremely important. So anyway, it was very interesting to have your thought about it. Thank you so much.
Well, if I'm allowed to, I would like to, first of all, good evening to Dr. António Portela and to all of you. Joint international post-graduation devoted to entrepreneurship and innovation in biohealth sector. I was listening your presentation, Dr. António, and you outlined that the IP is a fundamental asset. I would like to know from your side and from the perspective of the general manager of the strategic projects of Bial, how do you integrate in your corporate R&D strategy the possibility of having a systematic acquisition of university spin-offs or even startups? Do you do that type of technological surveillance?
Thank you for the question. Please call me Antonio. You know, doctors are PhDs or medical doctors, and I'm not. my training is my background is economics. So you know, please call me Antonio. No, thank you for the question. I think that's a very interesting question. IP is absolutely fundamental, and you know, we don't realize that until it gets to the end and you start getting, you know, threatened by generics. So you know, we've always discussed this internally about, you know, IP and this and that in the process, how important it was, but only now because Zebenix is actually starting to face challenges from generic companies. And to give you I mean, Zebenix is already generic in Portugal, so it has 2 generics already in Portugal. It has lost patent in Portugal. It will lose patent in the rest of Europe next year. And in the US, we still have 8 patents over the next few years. But we are facing, you know, very, very hard competition or very hard challenges from generic companies. What does this mean? This means that, you know, we have to we're trying to defend our patents as much as we can. And just to give you an example, the bill that we will have with lawyers this year, just in the US, to defend our patents there, is $12 million US. So it's not cheap. and only today, and it's, you know, this year we've been having very interesting conversations because, you know, people are going back 20 years. The Zebenix patent, the initial one, and then the ones, they were made in 96, 97, 98. So we're going back to, or the people analyzing this, they're going back, you know, what did we do in 96? What did we do in 97? And we're realizing how important it is that we are actually protecting what we have today. And this is just, you know, to give you an idea that, you know, if you're developing projects, please make sure that you protect them well. But protecting them well is you get experts, you get consultants, lawyer firms that are experts in this and actually work properly on this. I think this is one of the subjects that in Portugal we have not been very good at, is protecting our IP. I'll tell you, over the years we've had many contacts with startups or university groups that come to us and present things to us. Some things are interesting. They're not our area, but some things are not interesting. The most common thing that we find in the groups that present things to us is they don't have enough protection on the work they've done. And this also relates to some of the things that have come to us that look interesting, because they're normally very early stage. They look interesting, but these are researchers. They are coming from universities, spin-offs. They don't have a business sense, a very accurate business sense. And normally they've published this. They publish the information before protecting it. And sometimes it's difficult to explain to them, look, you publish it, you can't protect it anymore, it's worth zero. And they say, no, but it's very good science. Or, yes, the science is good, it's not protected, no one would put a penny in your project, because you can't sell it. So, when we look at, and as I said, I was saying to Ana Clara before, only over the last 2 or 3 years, we have been looking more at the projects, at projects coming out of spin-offs, and with the sense of trying to understand what's out there. Does that mean that we're going to get things internalized, or that we want to acquire or invest? We might do, but we might also want to, be in touch with these groups and afterwards, see how the development goes, and if things progress well, then we might want to come in later on. As I said, finance also and financial resources also play a very important role here, because we don't have everything, we don't have that many financial resources to invest. But what is key here is that the projects are protected. Because without that, it doesn't matter how people present these things, to any pharma company.
If I'm allowed, I would like to raise a second question, which is associated with the previous one. One of the issues that is being discussed nowadays, not only in the context of the biotech industry and pharma in general, it's the topic of the strategic competition. And you, Antonio, you have mentioned before that you established connections with competitors. How do you deal with this complex topic? Cooperate and compete in simultaneous terms with global companies?
It's a very good question, Ron, because we work with a lot of these companies, and they are our competitors as well in other areas. We have to first we have to before we start any relationship, we need to make sure that we do CDAs that protect the confidentiality of the projects, and then the contracts that we write have to be very well written. Again, here. I would say it's very important that we have very good support from legal teams to be able to write those contracts in any partnership, in licensing, out licensing. It's very important that we have very good legal support. We in all these partnerships that we've made, we've encountered a few problems, but what's critical here is when you do partnerships at early stage, because when you do a commercial partnership, the product's developed, is in the market, it's a different thing. But when you do early phase partnerships, there you have to be very careful, in who you talk to and what you present to them, because they might want to copy what you're trying to do, or they might want to, if not copying, they might want to do something similar. They want to see what you're doing. So you need to be very careful and understand what the other part. There's meetings for that, and a lot of times is common sense, is people understanding, can we share this with them? Are they worthwhile as a partner? So you don't share everything up front. You start building a relationship with a potential partner in terms of how you will progress. But it's a very good point in terms of how you deal and how you work with your competitors.
Thank you so much. Let me just say that for us it's a great honor to have you with us. Thank you so much, António.
Thank you. Thank you for your words. Other comments or questions?
May I ask something?
Yes, please.
I'm Gemma, and I work on artificial intelligence, so my question is related to that. If you have, between your research teams, if you have a team related to artificial intelligence, and if not, if you have any partner that do this for you, and if not, if it is a strategic line for the future that you think it would be important for your company in the future.
Thank you, Gemma. I can't say that we're very involved with artificial intelligence yet. We do have a bioinformatic team internally that is working and running, and they have very complex systems that help us in terms of what we do today. So I think we don't have. If I look at what some other companies are doing, very sophisticated, running very sophisticated models in terms of understanding the disease and understanding how they can target the disease, I think we're making progress there, and we can run models and test things in a computer model today. Basically we can run virtual experiments in 24 hours that would take years to do in the lab. And that is helping us a lot in terms of targeting the right molecules. We are also working with external companies in terms of bringing more of this internally on how we can, understanding the data that we have and collecting the data, compiling this and making it learn in terms of where we should move in the future. So, we're making progress there. We have some competences internally, we're using some externally. I see this as a very important thing. Strategically, all this, it was already very important. I think what has happened this year made us look a lot more at what we can do with data and artificial intelligence. And certainly over the last few months, we've advanced a lot in terms of what we're doing, and we will continue to do so in the next few months. So I think this will have a significant impact in the pharma world.
Thank you very much, and I hope so, because that.
I think you'll have a job in the future. Yeah. Well, now already, and for the future.
Okay, thank you very much.
Wants to share something?
I have a question, if I can. So my name is Gonçalo. So I have two questions for you, António. One is related to Gemma's question, but from a biomedical devices standpoint, because we are starting to get in the world that not only it's more interesting of not only taking the pharmaceutical, but how it is going to be introduced into the body, so the direction be more efficient. So my question for you is Bial also thinking of ways, or are they already investing in some types of biomedical devices that can promote and better operate the delivery of the pharma and the test?
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Gonçalo, for your question. Well, this is a new world. We don't have expertise in this area. I mean, this is one of the areas that we look for external competences when we have to do something like this. We don't in our areas, we haven't felt the need to actually look too much into biomedical devices. Now, if we look at where the trends are going in terms of health, we might have a little bit of this with Ongentys. Ongentys is our drug for Parkinson's disease. What we are looking now is, it's today what we have is a capsule. But what we are looking is at, are there different formulations or devices that we can give this to the patient? Namely, considering that our drug only works with levodopa. So basically, our drug alone doesn't do anything to a Parkinson patient. Our drug only works by enhancing another drug, which is levodopa, because it maintains levodopa for longer in the body. And that's what's helpful for the patient. Now, for severe Parkinson's disease patients, these patients, they don't tolerate levodopa. They don't take levodopa as an oral drug. They get, pumps, for example. For example, one of the things we're looking with Ongentys is, can we put Ongentys in the pump as well? Now, we have an issue there, which is, we can't, Ongentys is not soluble. So we need to look at areas on how can we make this soluble so that we can put it in the pump and also benefit, more severe patients. But this is just a small example of what we are doing. If you look at the medical devices and the biomedical devices today, it's amazing what's happening out there in terms of delivery, in terms of what we learn, and technology devices of what we learn. This will work in, and this, the future here is something fantastic, with all the gadgets that we use today, and how we can make sure that this gets to the right part of the body, gets to the right, this is something that, is evolving significantly. It will have to, there are certain questions there on how will regulators, approve things like that. How will we test these things, because, a lot of, when we have to do clinical trials, authorities tend to be very conservative in the way they, look at clinical trials. And again, I'll give you the example of Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's it's a motor, in a way, a motor disease. Now, when we run our phase 3 studies, basically the patient had to report, in a piece of paper, literally, in a piece of paper, how they felt. Did they have tremor? Did they have this? Did they feel this or that? Did they sleep well or not? Now, they have this, daily diaries, but, they don't really feel the diaries. And that's one of the things that clinicians tell us, a patient does not feel the diary every day. So normally, they get to the weekend when they have more time. How do I feel on Monday and Tuesday? So it's, the information you end up getting is, it's more or less, you don't have accurate information. Now, with the technology, I use an iWatch. With the technology that we have today, if regulators accept a lot of this technology that exists today, we will be able to have, precise data and not, diaries filling in diaries. But this is true. This is true for Parkinson. But if you think of drugs like diabetes or diseases like diabetes or hypertension, where normally what happens is we have very efficacious drugs today, but the patients don't take those drugs, or they don't go enough to the doctor, and the doctor and let's say you have hypertension and you take 20 milligrams of something, and that might control you in a certain period, but after a year time you're not controlled. But you don't go to the doctor doesn't see that. So if we have these devices that send this data to the doctor, and then suddenly they send an alert to the doctor, your patient, your blood pressure of that patient is not controlled, or the diabetes of that patient is not controlled. So I'm a doctor and I call you in and say, look, your drug, I need to change your medication. You need to come in for exams. So this is something that is evolving, and potentially what it will do is, with the same drugs, we'll be able to be much more efficacious in controlling patients because of what it can deliver. Yeah. So you probably don't need better drugs, but these devices, what they will be able to do is they'll be able to, on the one hand, prevent a lot more, but on the other hand, control the disease a lot more over time.
Okay, it's like preventive medicine, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, of course. My second question is from a university student and a young entrepreneur is, what is the best way, because talking to a big company like Bial, it's for a young entrepreneur can be a little more pressure than you used to. So what is the best way to reach you and to contact you for future projects, or to just establish some student and enterprise relationship?
Mm-hmm. I'm happy. I'm happy to share my email, and you can send if you have projects. I'm happy for you to send the projects. We will always look at the projects. I mean, we don't ignore emails that we receive. So we do get feedback. It might not be what you expect, but you do get feedback in terms of what we do. I share this with my team. We also have a responsibility in Portugal because of what we're doing. We have a responsibility to try to help, entrepreneurs or students that want to come out and want to see. I think we have, and this is a more philosophical answer that I'm going to give to you, but I think over the last few years we've been able to create. Academia has been able to develop, a very significant number of well-prepared researchers. The issue that I think we have is, we don't really understand how, or most of these researchers, because there's not enough training on that. They don't understand how to get to the market, how to protect, how to prepare a business case in terms of the development. What's the pathway? How to finance this? These are questions that a researcher is not prepared to do, because obviously they haven't been trained for this. And our universities, they're very focused on basic research and not on research that actually reaches out to patients. So I do think that we, because of what we've done, we do have a responsibility to also contribute to this. And I have to say that's one of the reasons why I'm talking to you today, is because I really enjoy doing this. It's because I think that's, we have developed very good researchers in Portugal. I would like more of them to be successful. And that's why I'm saying, we try to look at the projects internally, and we try to give feedback, being good or bad feedback in terms of, these are the things that we think, don't work. These are the things that you should explore to the future. And if you want, some advice, for sure, we can get some of our people, to invest and to give some advice. We've had some of our people be mentors to some of the projects as well. It's also good for them because they get to know the system that exists and the projects that are out there. And if something moves and is really interesting, then we want also to collaborate there.
Okay, that's very interesting for a student point of view, because we are always trying to reach a little more and learn a little more, so it's very good. António, thank you very much for your answers, and I hope I see you in Covilhã, in Ubi Medical, where my company is. I hope I see you there someday. Thank you very much.
So I'll share. I take the opportunity. I share my email with you. It's very simple. It's antonio.portela@bial.com. So it's very simple. It's my name @bial.com. If any of you has projects, or if you'd like to get some advice on something, probably I won't be able to help. But I'll, if I have someone internally that can help, we'll try to get that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. Okay. Before you said that one of the most important assets for your company is the people. Do you have a strategy for the talent acquisition, and which is the strategy?
Sorry, I didn't really understand the question. So people are very important, and we have a strategy for acquisition. I don't see how that's related.
No, it's related because typically in a fast-growing company it's difficult to find the talent to improve the quality of the team. And typically, at least in the software environment, the companies are used to establish a tailored acquisition methodology to find the best talents and to improve the team with good people which get potential to the team.
Sorry, I didn't understand you. Talent acquisition.
Okay.
Sorry, I was understanding something different. But what do you mean is, if we acquire talent by acquiring other companies? Is that what you mentioned?
No, I was mentioning if you have a strategy for find the right people for the right place inside your company.
Yeah, I mean that's a fundamental part of what we do. There's not that many of us around. I mean, if you look at research and development, we have 160 people. That's a small team. And what I say to, and I think the culture that we have internally is that every person counts. And I say this very often to our managers that if they have someone on their team that is not competent enough, they're dragging the whole project. And it's their responsibility to actually make that happen. So when we go and look for people, and in some cases we can't find people in Portugal. As I mentioned to you, we have 17 different nationalities of people in R&D, which is very nice because there's a mix of cultures and experiences in there. Today, it's much easier for us to attract people because of the projects that we've run and what we have achieved. 20 years ago, it was very difficult to recruit people, I have to say. Because Portugal had no experience and no background in terms of pharmaceutical research. Portugal was not that attractive country to live, so it was very difficult to recruit people externally. Now, and we didn't have that many good people internally. What we have today is a different. It's a different perspective. If we want to recruit more junior people in Portugal, we can do that. And when I say more junior is, because there's no other company that does research and development in Portugal, what we find out is that, if we want someone more senior that has experience in running projects, in running the development of projects, we don't have that in Portugal. Now, the people are very, very well trained. So that's why I'm saying, if we want to recruit people more junior, we have a lot of talent in Portugal to recruit. And we're very picky. Fortunately, we can be very picky because, we always have, for some positions, I would say, we have 400, 500 people applying for one job. So we can be picky in terms of the ones that we choose. And obviously, we try to choose the best ones. We run, for some cases, we run complex recruitment processes to make sure that we try to get the best people possible. It doesn't mean that we always get it right. No, it doesn't. What we have to be very good at is that if after 6 months we have to evaluate that person, and if that person is not responding, we have to let her go and start the process again. And this is something that, namely in research, it's very difficult for managers in research because they don't have that much of experience in recruiting, training people, and sometimes they're good, they're still adapting. And what I say to people always is, if after 6 months you have doubts, let them go. Because if after 6 months you have doubts, you will continue to have doubts in the future. You might have less doubts, but you will continue to have doubts in the future. If the person is right, you'll know after 6 months.
Hey guys, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, I have.
Maybe?
Okay.
Sergio, we'll come back to you.
Thank you. My question is linked actually with your last answer regarding recruitment. My answer is more focused about managing a company like yours, like Bial. So you mentioned that in some cases you have to make some high effort, strong investment in make a stronger sales force. So my question is, after all the process, how do you make the approach to the market? I mean, your first type of customer. I mean, when you design a project, when you decide to follow a project, do you have from the beginning the customer segment in mind, or it's something that you are adapting depending on the pathway? And related to this, I also wanted to know what is the impact of the sales force in the decision about what projects your company begins, or if the decision of the starting a project is more linked to the scientific team.
Thank you. Two very good questions. When do we start the work, looking at the customers and commercial? We start the work very early on. I'll give you the example. This company that we've acquired in the US, it has a project in Parkinson's disease, and it's in phase 1, potentially entering phase 2 end of next year, beginning of 2022. We are already looking at business cases, at prices, how can we go to the market? This is something that our team has, immediately started to look at. This is the time for us to do it. Even in preclinical, we have to do, even with the project is preclinical, so it's years away from the market, we have to do a rough business case about, how do we expect this molecule with a certain target profile, to get to the market. When we get there, what is the competition going to be? What's in the pipeline from other companies? What will be generic? What will be the prices of these products? Who will be the target profile? Who would be the patients that will be eligible for our drug in combination, in monotherapy? These are things that we have very early on, still in preclinical, to start looking at. At this stage, when we are in the middle of the clinical phase, this is something that we have to, be very good at now, because. And here, we have to make decisions, and don't forget that, we take 10, 12, 13 years to get to the market. We need to recover that investment. So if at this stage, and things start getting very expensive in phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials. So before we embark into this, we need to make sure that we understand what pricing will we have, not what pricing exists today, but what pricing will exist in 5 years' time. Who are going to be the competitors? How many patients will I be able? What market share do I expect to have with my target profile of the drug? To make sure that at least we have an idea that we will be able to recover the investment. This will be a positive investment. So we have to do that very early on. We can't wait until late to do this. Also, namely, for example, when you're in preclinical, you need to look at the market data. Because imagine you have 10 molecules. You don't have money to invest in all of them. You need to make a market analysis to understand which are the ones that have more potential from a scientific perspective, but also from a commercial perspective. You might have something that scientifically is very, very good, but then you look at the market and the prices are cents, and you're not going to be able to recover the investment. And that's a difficult decision, but you might want to choose another project that has more probability of commercial success in the future. If you don't have commercial success, then you're not going to be able to recover, and you're not going to be able to reinvest in the R&D projects. And in terms of, do we make decisions based on the sales force, on where we are or the different therapeutic areas that we are? We in Bial, it's not that linear. So we have to look at the sales force. We have to look at where, for example, we have a sales force today now in neurology. It covers neurology in Europe. Now, does that mean that we're going to ditch projects that are not in neurology? No. Science, for us, science speaks louder. So if the science is good and if there's potential, we look at it. What we need to, and the strategic evaluation we have to make here is, do we bring the product ourselves to the market, or do we license it to someone else that has capabilities in this area? And that's the strategic decisions that we have. Because this product, for example, I was mentioning to you this drug in pulmonary arterial hypertension. One of the decisions we will have to make very shortly is, do we bring this to the market ourselves? Or do we license this to a company that has presence in this area, that is probably going to be much more competent in selling than we are, because we don't have expertise there. So this is what we have to balance when we have to make decisions in terms of going forward. So, but science is I think science is the most important one, but you can't forget the market and the return on investment.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Sergio.
First of all, thank you for your time. We know that are very valuable. I have one question direct to the patent. How many patents do you have that have started with the molecules or products based on that have started in universities or partnerships?
Internally?
Internally.
I mean, base patents of the 7 molecules, none. They were all developed internally. I don't know exactly. I do think some of the, because when we patent one compound, then we make a lot of different, for formulations, for other things. The base patents, they were all developed internally. So they're all owned by the company. They were all developed internally. We do have some. And I don't know if it's formulations or others. It's not a big number that was done externally. The only ones that, are the ones that we acquired from Bial Biotech. Those ones were external. They were not ours. So those ones we acquired, and they have a number of patents there as well.
Okay, guys, do you have any more questions? If you don't have, I have prepared 11, but I'm not going to ask 11 questions, of course. But this will be for another meeting, another talk. But I just choose here 2 of my questions. You mentioned, Antonio, in your presentation that Europe is not a competitive space for being innovative in the pharmaceutical sector, as it is, for example, in the US. Why is that so? Is it related with regulatory frameworks? Is it because we have a few actors, as you already mentioned in another interview, I think to Jornal Público, you said that in Europe we are increasing in the number of biotech companies, but decreasing in the number of manufacturers, or is it the regulations, the regulatories, the IP constraints? Because, and I would like also for you to connect this commentary, this comment that you made in your presentation. I would also like to connect this with the regulations and the regulatory constraints and the pressures that involved, for example, these vaccines during the pandemics. It was faster. It was possible to break some kind of delays in the regulatory frameworks. So why aren't we so competitive in Europe? And if we have experience for this kind of pandemic, this situation in easing the chain of the process, what could be done in order to make this process more, or this scenario more competitive, and the process more, I don't know, light, because it's not possible to be light, because if it is light, people will suffer for sure. So this is more like a comment than a question.
Thank you, Dina. So Europe, I'll give you some numbers to show you where things are. 15 years ago, 5 out of the 10 most sold drugs in the world have been developed in Europe. Nowadays, 6 have been developed in the US by US companies, only 2 in Europe. Why is that? Because the US and the US companies have been investing a lot more, but a significant lot more amount in research and development compared to Europe. The US, the investment in research and development of new drugs in the US is more than double of what exists today in Europe. Why is that happening? Several reasons. One, the European Union is a complex thing. It's a very complex thing. And it's complex in a lot of ways, has a lot of regulations, has a lot of... it's not so friendly in terms of innovation. IP-wise, the EU wants to put more and more problems regarding IP. So protection to the drugs. Again, the US is much more friendlier to IP. But there's one fundamental issue, which is pricing. If you look at the prices in the US and if you look at the prices in Europe, and I'll give you the example of Zevenix. The price of Zevenix in the US it's generic now in Portugal, but before generics, the price in the US was 8 times higher than in Portugal. 8 times. Now, I'm not defending that the US is the best way, because it's in terms of healthcare, it gets extreme, where if you can afford, if you have money, you have the better coverage in the world. If you don't have money, you don't get treated, and that's very extreme. But that's how the US operates. In Europe, we're much more social oriented, which means there's a huge pressure on health budgets and on prices of medicine. Now, prices of medicine represent about 14 or 15% of the whole healthcare budget, but it's the easiest thing to cut. It's very difficult to organize hospitals, to organize the health system, to make it more efficient. It's much easier to cut on healthcare, and we see this in Portugal as we see it in other countries. What does this do? Companies, they invest more in the US because they make more money in the US. If I can sell my drug 8 times higher in the US, I will invest in the US. I won't invest in Europe. And that's what's been happening, the unbalanced in terms of what's happening in Europe compared to the US has a lot to do with pricing, or mostly to do with pricing and profitability in Europe compared to the US. It also has to do with the regulatory framework and with the IP framework, which are tougher. And don't forget that all these things have to be decided, in Europe by, this is not a national decision. These are decided by European Parliament. And the European Parliament is a mix of 27 countries, where when we look at, and each country has a vote. So if you look at Western Europe is much more prone to innovation. Why? Because they have manufacturing sites, they have R&D centers. But if you look at Eastern Europe doesn't have research centers, and they have generic companies. That's what they were good at, was generic companies. So then they don't defend innovation. And when there's all these discussions in Europe about regulation, about IP, incentives for all this, Eastern European countries have a lot of, have the same votes as Western. So there's and still today there's a huge debate about what's happening in Europe. So Europe is, and I'm not saying it's not attractive, I think, the pharmaceutical industry invests about 120 or 130 billion euros in research and development. So it's still a lot of money, but it invests more than double that in the US. So, there's a huge discrepancy of what's happening in the US, and that's why they're coming out with more drugs. That's why they're coming out with more startups, and that's why the American companies are buying European companies, because they have more cash. And that's so this one in terms of Europe. Now, how do I see that this period with the pandemic, the vaccine development and regulatory? I mean, what we've seen during this year is has no precedent. A year ago, in December 19, we barely knew anything about COVID-19 and the SARS-CoV something 2 or whatever it's called. We almost didn't know anything about this. And a year later, we have vaccines being approved and being given to patients worldwide. I think this has several risks because if you look at, and I think we all hope that this is going to run well. Now, the problem is very big at the global scale with millions of people infected and deaths, a lot of deaths. So authorities have been, companies and research centers. I mean, there's one thing. There's been collaboration between companies, research centers, institutes, academia at a never seen level before, and this has obviously advanced things a lot. But we have jumped a number of steps here in terms of, I told you earlier on, and you've seen the slide, it takes 10, 12 years to get a drug to the market. If you're very good, it takes 8 or 9. To do this in 9 months means that, you've gone through a few steps without, I wouldn't say without running it properly, but you just skipped some steps. So if you're skipping steps, you're adding risk to the vaccine. To all the vaccines that are put out there in terms of safety. I mean, if you think, when we develop a drug, it takes from when we start, working with the chemistry of a compound, it takes 4 or 5 years before we touch not a patient, before we touch a healthy volunteer. 4 or 5 years. We've touched, healthy volunteers, patients, and we're giving it to the population in general now in 9 months. So we don't know enough about safety yet, but we still don't know enough about how efficacious the vaccines are. We don't know. Are they going to protect us for a week, a month, 6 months, a year? We don't know. The results that these vaccines are getting improved on are results on 90 patients, 95, 85. So it's everything's very small. We are running a lot of risks. Now the authorities have looked at this and says, yes, we're running a lot of risks, but compared with the global situation that we face, it's worthwhile, taking these risks. And I think that's where we are. Now the learnings from here, I think there's going to be extraordinary learnings in terms of how to move projects more quicker. I think there will be that. I don't think we'll be able to develop drugs in 9 months ever. I think this is an exception. But I think there'll be a lot of learnings from what has happened here, namely in terms of collaborations, in terms of how regulators look at drugs at the same time as the drugs are being developed. I think this will probably shorten time that drugs will get to the market.
Yeah. I would like to conclude my questions with one that is related with the people. In your presentation, you mentioned a lot the central role of people. Furthermore, we have been talking about devices for drug administration and putting people in the center of the process. Also, I know that Bial also invests in a parapsychology, the part of bringing people into the center. A few weeks ago, I even shared in my social networks a sentence from your father, which was, I remain convinced that many of the phenomena that are attributed as fantastic are mere fantasies, but also that we have available a form of energy that is characteristic and fantastic for what we have known so far, and that, if put at our service, if well updated by humanity, can allow a better way of life, a form of harmonious framework at the universal level of respect for oneself, for the other, and for the universe. We talk a lot about patient centricity and putting patients in the center of the decisions and of the core. In your pathway, in the development of Bial's products, where do you study or put the energy of the patient in the process? How do you hear the voice of the patients, and how do you involve the patient in order for the drug to be to increase the adherence of the patient, to increase the acceptability and the efficacy of the patient as a process also involving the mindset of the patient. So what is the role of parapsychology in Bial and in all the drug development process?
Very, very simple answer. We don't do that.
Oh.
We're not allowed to do that. So, you have to think that, clinical trials, and you're talking about something which is different from our pharma business. So, basically what Dean is talking about is, my father is a medical doctor by training. He actually never intended to work in the company. He ended up working in the company because my grandfather died very young, and he, because circumstances of life, he ended up giving up his medical career and his research career, which he wanted to invest in. So my father wanted to be a researcher himself, and I think that's also why he followed this route in the company of developing himself to research, because he had that gene in him. Now, what he wanted to do, if he had not been running Bial, he wanted to be a researcher. His areas of focus was the brain and understanding the energies and how we all work, and this unknown fantastic things that the miracles, and how can we explain these things. This is what attracts him in terms of research, and he always says, I don't understand why science doesn't dedicate himself to study this and to say what's true and what's not true, and that's it's his conviction. So he, a few years, 20 years ago, he established the Bial Foundation, and the Bial Foundation, gives grants to researchers, to study this phenomenon with the scientific method, and some of the things that you mentioned, Dina, there. In terms of what we do with our drugs in the company and in clinical trials, we ignore all of this. We're not allowed to do this. We're not allowed to contact the patients. And there are very strict rules on how we can run the clinical trials. So these are there are established rules on how we can proceed, on who is only the clinician can contact the patient. So
Okay. Thank you, António. I know that Laura wants also to ask something. Yeah, Laura.
Yes, thank you. So first, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. And as António said, how can we contact you? I already sent you a notification in LinkedIn. It's something I'm taking kind of advantages of these kind of talks, and I'm trying to amplify my network of contacts, mainly in LinkedIn, because it's like the most formal one. So thank you so much. Okay, first of all, I would like to make a comment about the COVID vaccine, because I have read, I don't remember where, but I read that they had the chance to develop so fast the vaccine because they did at the same time some of the phases during the developing of the vaccine. So if it was the clinical phase, instead of doing phase 1, then phase 2, they were doing both of them at the same time, and that's why they could develop it faster. I don't know if that's ethical or not. That's just for the rest of the group. But I think that's why they could develop it so fast. And my question now. So we have talked about the situation in Europe. Will you say that maybe one of the main reasons why we don't have that high amount of compounds is because the centers or the research or the money for the for the research of things are more focused into discovering things than creating products? So my feeling is that all the groups of investigation, they focus in learn and discover and know more about some things, but not to have a product at the end. that's my feeling with Europe. And for example, lately I have been looking for PhDs and work, and all related to research is always related to study, not to produce. And maybe that's something different between Europe and America. I don't know.
Thank you for your words, and thank you for your comments as well. I mean, I don't know enough about the vaccines. We're not in this. We don't do anything in infectious diseases. So I've heard a lot of stories as well, but you know, it's difficult to know what's true and what's not true in this development. Now, going back to your question about the development. Sorry, what was the question again?
Will you say that research, or the main objective of research in Europe, is to be innovative, but in order to discover things, not to produce things? That's my feeling, and I'm asking you if you think the same or your point of view.
I think you have a point there, and this is my personal opinion. I think you have a point there. I mean, I don't know exactly what's happening very detailed in other European countries. I know more about Portugal. If you look at what Europe is doing, I mean, in that sense, the US and even the UK, they're much more pragmatic. They're developing things to reach the market, to reach patients. And they're very focused in this. I think the rest of Europe still has a very, romantic perspective of how research is done. And if I look, for example, I look at Portugal, and there's a few colleagues from Portugal here. We do a lot of basic research, fundamental research. And that's needed. I'm not saying that is not needed. What the point that you have here is probably the balance between what's fundamental and basic research is too high compared to the US. The US has a more balanced approach. So they are targeting a lot, real medical needs of patients. In Europe, we probably, I would say, if I look at Portugal, we probably have like 90% of the research that is done in Portugal is basic. 80 to 90% is basic research. So research, when you look at patients, at real problems that patients have, I think the Americans are much more aggressive than we are. I'll give you an example. We've got a guy working with us in bioinformatics, and he trained at Coimbra University. He did, I think, it was biology at Coimbra University. Then he did his PhD in Italy, I think, and he was working at I think it was Stanford, and then he went to Stanford. And he was teaching there, and he was also working in a few projects. So the first thing he did, and he had to do some work, and he was preparing. When he went to talk to his superior, his boss looked, he didn't even look at it. He said, have you run this by business development and by IP? And he looked at him and said, what? And he said, have you run this by business development and IP? And he said, no, why would I do that? I said, well, you have to see if your project is viable, commercially viable. So he went to business development, and they trashed his project. It's worth nothing. So he went, and he said, no, well, then you have to think about something else. So he started working on something else. And again, his superior told him, go to business development IP. And they again trashed his project. So again to the bin. And he told me afterwards, after at the third time, I've learned. And I said, look, I've got to think about something that's going to be beneficial for patients and that we can commercialize. Or potentially we can do. If I don't do that, he's just going to keep sending my projects to the bin. So it's just one example, but I think it gives you that sense that, the US is much more focused about, patients, about getting to the market.
I agree. Thank you.
Okay, António, it's almost 2 hours since you started here with us. I just asked you for 1 hour of your time. I'm so sorry. But I think that sure I did really appreciate what you were here telling us, teaching us, because it's better in life and the first person to hear about your experience, your roadblocks, your obstacles, your challenges, than to read only and to transfer these readings to students. So, in my person, in the name of also University of Beira Interior and our incubator, We Medical, thanks a lot for the time that you spare here with us, teaching us. Thanks a lot, António.
Thank you, Dina, for your words, and and thanks for the discussion. It has been. I'm very pleased, and to be honest, I don't mind spending. I had a bit more time. I don't mind. I don't normally get the sort of discussion I had and the questions I had here today. So really appreciate all the discussion, because for me that's the most interesting part. Normally, what I do is I speak, and then one question or two, and then we go away. Very interesting to get, and I wish you all best of luck. And thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Merry Christmas as well.
Merry Christmas. And